Hey everybody, happy spring. I thought we would move the classroom today to this side of the academy as we discuss World War II and you're reading in chapter 6. I thought this might be semi-appropriate. We'll talk more on that later. As I just said, today in our video, we're going to talk about chapter 26, World War II, what you read. Some of it was review from what we had learned in class a week ago, but some of it was new material, so I want to speak to that and make 3 strong points. And at the end of the video, I want to discuss some things for you to think about after you have watched the clip from Saving Private Ryan, the storming of Normandy on D-Day. So if you haven't watched that clip yet, please go to the APUSH playlist and watch that clip, that 20-minute clip. As I said earlier, I will warn you, it is very graphic, very violent, very bloody. If that's not something you want to see, then don't see it. And just listen to what I have to say because you will get the gist of it from the reading. But if it is something you'd like to see, please go over and watch that now. Okay, so there are 3 main things I want to discuss about what you read in chapter 26. The first is how the war, and at least the ramp up to a war, and eventually the war, changed the society within America. And not ironically, but in sort of a repetition of history, we're seeing that shift right now. What you read is in one section of the book, that second section of chapter 26, was how the government, the U.S. government under FDR and some of the programs established by the New Deal shifted American culture, American society, and American tradition to support the war effort. And a lot of this came from 2 major subgroups of the population, the first of which is women, and the second is African Americans. Now, obviously, the subpopulation of Americans that was most affected by the war were the men themselves, young men between the ages of 18 and 40 who were either drafted or volunteered for the war. They obviously had very different experiences than everybody else, but that doesn't mean that there weren't hardships for those who stayed behind. In most cases, because the raw materials needed for war were in such high demand, both by the United States and by the Allies, the United States, just like it did in World War I, asked women and minorities to come into the factories and take over jobs that were primarily held by white men. This was the best thing to ever happen to race relations and gender equality in the United States. As women entered the workforce in mass numbers, in far greater numbers than they ever had in World War I, men who were left behind, the older men, the men who were crucial to the production of these war materials, saw that women, surprise, surprise, could do the work. And women became a part of the workforce. They became a part of everyday working. And the men who stayed behind became used to them, if that's not the best expression of their feelings, but at least they became comfortable with them so that when men eventually did come home, a woman working in a factory or working in an office or working in a professional capacity was not something that was seen as unusual anymore because of the valuable role they had played in World War II. But it wasn't just the working that women did. It was what they did at home. I think about my great-grandmother, Renner. I know that during World War II, she worked in a factory that was in St. Louis, actually outside of St. Louis in Missouri, producing boots. She sewed rubber soles onto boots that were part of the Army. She'd never done that before, but she felt it was her duty to do so. 2 of her sons went and fought in the war. Both of them came home, but that was the way she contributed. But she contributed in other ways too, and that's the parallel that we see to right now, today, in the United States, is that these men and women who stayed behind contributed in ways where they weren't forced to. They did it out of their patriotism and their love for their fellow Americans. And these are the things we see as you read, things like Liberty Gardens and conservation and rationing with their green books and stamps and all those kinds of things. The American government forced some of these things onto the American people, but a lot of them were done voluntarily by the people because they felt that it was the right thing to do. And African Americans were a huge part of this as well. African American men went and fought in the war, but they also stayed behind and worked in factories and did jobs much the same as women did and contributed to the war effort. So in a way, the war was a sort of a lifting agent for minorities like women and men to give them an opportunity to contribute to the war. Now I want to move on to what you saw in that Saving Private Ryan clip. And there's three things I want you to think about. The first is the care with which this film was produced. In my opinion, this is the greatest World War II movie ever. It is so well done that while Steven Spielberg was filming this scene, this first beginning scene of Saving Private Ryan, he had soldiers who were at D-Day alongside him, sitting next to his director's chair, telling him what the soldiers should do, what it should look like, what it should feel like. In fact, if you read the production notes from the film, you'll know that when he started filming, it was kind of a sunny day. And he asked the soldiers, hey, is this kind of what it was like? And they said, no, it was gray and it was rainy and it was cloudy and misty. And so he waited nearly a week for the weather to get like that so he could film it. He filmed it at the exact time of day that the attack took place, and so that the lighting would be right. There's just so much attention to detail in this scene that we can really use it almost as a historical document. The second thing I wanted to point out is how most of these soldiers who were a part of the storming of the beaches had never been in a battle before, and so this was something that was very, very new for them. And obviously you can see it in their faces, the actors who play these roles, of how terrified they were, and yet this was the make or break. And the third thing I wanted to comment about this is the very plan itself. The storming of the beaches of Normandy and D-Day in itself was a all-in kind of plan. And Ike Eisenhower, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who put together Operation Overlord and the D-Day invasion, knew that it had to be big, and that if it succeeded, it would be the first step towards the end of the war. But if it failed, it could mean utter failure for the entire war and a defeat of the Allies. So this battle, this plan, this endeavor was so important. Everything hung on this one event. And if you had to find moments in history where they would be dramatically different, if something hadn't gone one way or the other, D-Day has to be it. It was so powerful that 2 days before, Eisenhower wrote 2 messages, and he gave them to his communications officer. And he said, if the battle goes well, I would like you to send President Roosevelt message A. If the battle doesn't go well, send it message B. And message A is very simple. It says, D-Day has been successful. We have stormed the beaches of Normandy, and the coast is ours. On to Germany. That's a paraphrase. The second message, message B, is a message that was intended if the battle had gone badly. And the gist of it, Eisenhower says, we have stormed the beaches of Normandy and have been repelled. But the soldiers fought bravely. The officers led valiantly. If there is any blame to our failure, it is mine and mine alone. Now, here's a guy who writes this 2 days before the event has ever happened, and he's taken all the blame on himself. To me, that is a leader. That message alone could be justification for why years later he would be elected president overwhelmingly, because people felt that he was somebody that was going to take responsibility for his actions. That's what you want in a general. So think about those things as you watch that clip. And if you have the opportunity to watch the rest of the movie, please do. I know you will like it. It's an excellent film. It's full of great actors, great acting, great directing. The whole thing is fantastic. I watch it once a year, and it still gets me. So make sure to take your time to watch it. And if not, that's fine too. All right. Keep working on your short answer questions. I've seen a couple of them. They look great. I will start to give feedback as soon as more of them come in. And then keep a lookout for next week. We are going to be jumping into the DBQ. And as I said in the earlier video, every day we are going to have a section of a DBQ boot camp. And we're going to be, as I post videos, you're going to post comments, and I'm going to respond to those comments the next day and answer questions. So it's going to be semi-interactive in that way. All right, sounds great. So remember to keep safe, keep healthy, and to stay smart. And I will see you all tomorrow.